Hello and welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here for the first time, welcome. I'm so happy you're here. My name's Hannah, and on this channel I post a lot of content about anti-MLM. So at the beginning of every one of my videos, I link my big anti-MLM playlist for you. It's also linked down below. There's almost 190 videos on that playlist, and I've been told it's very bingeable. And as always, if you're really into these horror story videos in particular, there is its own separate playlist on my channel as well. We are on our 78th video in that series. All of the stories I read in these videos are viewer submissions, so if at any point you have your own MLM horror story you would like to have considered for a video, I'm always taking submissions, and the instructions for how to send that to me are down below. So without further ado, let's read some stories today. This one says, "Hi Hannah and kitties. I've been binging your videos for a couple of weeks now and I wanted to write in. Thank you so much for the content you share and educating people about the dangers of being in an MLM. And also a big thank you for being so validating and kind to those of us who have gotten out and reassuring us that we were not lazy or unsuccessful in our businesses. I've always grown up around MLM. My mom has always hopped from one business opportunity to the next. Zango, Body by V, Kangen Water, Young Living, Trenant, to name a few. I've also had other family members involved in MLM and currently have a sister who is still a consultant for Senegence. Growing up, this business model seemed so normal for me, so when I was finally approached on my 18th birthday by a Young Living rep, I didn't even have a second thought. And yes, you read that right, my 18th birthday. I had at least 4 people try to recruit me that day into their MLM. That does not surprise me in the least, considering that MLM structures thrive on recruitment and there is a saturation point for that. Meaning that everybody over 18, I feel like, has kind of been picked over. It's a pretty common experience that if you are over the age of 18, you've probably been pitched for at least one MLM at some point. So it is a very intentional strategy to go for people who are newly 18. In this case, the day you turn 18, they're pitching you for an MLM because that is the age cutoff in which it is legal to join an MLM. And it's also a really pivotal moment in a person's life. When you're 18, that's typically around the age that you're graduating high school, you're deciding what you're going to do next, whether that's college or entering the workforce. You're still pretty young, but you also think you've got it all figured out. And for lack of a better term, you're in a very vulnerable position, the perfect state for someone to come in and say, I have a perfect opportunity for you. Here's what you can do next. You're going to be a business owner and you're going to make all this money and you're going to have this fantastic lifestyle and you can work on your own hours and make as much money as you want to. It's all incredibly enticing, especially if you're an 18-year-old and you have no background knowledge on MLMs. In your case, though, it sounds like you grew up around MLMs and they were kind of normalized. So you didn't bat an eye about people pitching you for an MLM, and it sounds like you decided to join Young Living at that point. It was the beginning of the global pandemic and I was about to graduate high school. I had multiple people asking me if I would consider joining their business opportunity when I turned 18. Exactly. I never had a negative view on MLMs at that point, so I was considering my options. I had used Young Living for years because my mom would buy the oils and slather them on us for seasonal allergies, sicknesses, tummy aches, etc. So when it came time for my birthday, I decided to sign up under one of the Young Living reps that reached out to me. I was freshly 18, lonely, looking to connect with other women and also bring in some extra cash since I couldn't work at my cafe job that I had before lockdown. In other words, I was the perfect target. Yes, if I had just read ahead one more paragraph, I would have saved myself all that explanation beforehand, but you did a great job explaining exactly the kind of position that you were in as an 18-year-old, and you had the pandemic thrown in there too. That was one extra layer for you that may have factored into your decision to join the MLM. I was so excited. I got my starter kit and I was immediately thrown into all of the Facebook groups, group chats, and joining team calls. I was hustling to start my business. I was posting on Instagram daily, going live, and even had luck signing a few people up before my starter kit even came in the mail. I have no clue why those people trusted me before I even had my own kit. Everyone was so nice. The love bombing started. I felt so welcomed and wanted, and I felt like I had a real chance at becoming successful. My upline told me that she could see me being a diamond, and it made me feel so important. I was working so hard doing all the things the top leaders were doing, and I was even recognized by them. They would always say, "Wow, you remind me so much of myself. You're definitely going places." I idolized these women. They felt like celebrities, and being recognized by them was an honor. I worked the biz for just over a year, and I only ever ranked up to the second rank. And if I remember correctly, my biggest check was still only under $200, even though I was running my business like the diamonds. I now know they were just telling me that so I would keep working my business to make them money. Hindsight is 2020, isn't it? Working, selling Young Living for over a year, and the biggest paycheck you had was not even $200. That is so telling. I was convinced, though, that this was the path to financial freedom. My then boyfriend, now husband, was super on edge about it all. He kept warning me of all of it, and I just ignored it. I was so brainwashed that I would go into the group chat asking advice on how to convince him that this was a good idea. And let me tell you, the fact that I need to convince him of this should have been a red flag. They directed me to an old recording of a team call where the lead Huns came on with their husbands to chat about how they proved to them it was a successful business model and the sacrifices they made to make it happen. Things like spending less time with your kids now and hustling pretty much all hours of the day now so that you can eventually have residual income and won't have to work it as hard later. This little anecdote is reminding me of a video I did, gosh, it has to have been over a year ago at this point. It was called the Men of Monate Zoom call. I know you're in Young Living, but this happened in a different MLM too, where they had top earners in the companies come on a Zoom call with their husbands. And the whole point was to say, look how great this is for our family, and look how I got my husband on board and he's so supportive of me now, even though he wasn't in the beginning. I'll go back and find that video and link it below if you want to see it, if you haven't already. But just the fact that that is a topic of conversation, a topic that they hosted a training Zoom call on, is the biggest red flag of all time, I feel like. Here's how I convinced my husband that this was a good idea. How about if it was something legitimate, it probably wouldn't take that much convincing. You probably wouldn't have to train on this on a Zoom call. The results would kind of speak for themselves, would they not? The fact that they are framing it like your husband having concerns about what you're doing is some kind of objection that you need to overcome is so sketchy to me in my eyes. And I can only imagine the kind of strain that would put on your relationship if you're not successful in convincing him that it's a good idea or something. Or if you do convince him that it's a good idea and he trusts you and then it still doesn't work out the way you were hoping, that can put a big strain on your relationship too, an unnecessary strain that we would not have to be going through if one of the partners wasn't getting involved with an MLM. I was in Young Living from April of 2020 to around June of 2021. My husband and I had gotten engaged in September of 2020 and we were about to get married in September of 21, so my business and commitment to Young Living naturally fizzled out with the stress of planning a wedding. My parents had also gotten really sick with COVID just a few weeks before my wedding, so running a business was the last thing on my mind. I am so grateful to this day that I wasn't one of the Huns to use their sick parents as an excuse to pitch their MLM. Around October of 2021, my upline, who I'd become pretty close with, was checking in on who her group mentors for the month might be, and if I was still wanting to run my biz and be a group mentor that month. I told her I didn't know how much I could commit since I was newly married, sharing my finances with someone else, and I didn't have a lot of time because of my job. She said she understood and left it at that. About a week later, she said how there was a Young Living event being put on in Nashville and it was $100 to come to the event. She said that since I live in Nashville, I should come because it could be a great opportunity to relaunch my business and that maybe it would reignite my why. Big eye roll, but I digress. I told her that I could not spend $100 to come and that I wasn't ready to start hustling again, but that if she had any free time, I would love to come to see her and get coffee when she had a break since she lived out of state. It came time for the event and I was super excited to see my friend who was in town, because she was really my friend after all, right? I got ready and drove to the event center. She told me she'd have about an hour to catch up and hang out and to meet her in the cafeteria. I was under the impression the entire time that it would just be her and I. That is when it hit me. I walked up to her and she was with a group of at least 10 other of her Young Living rep friends at the table. Some of them were the diamond leaders that would lead our team calls. I realized realized that I was about to get interrogated on why I wasn't doing the biz, and I was right. I sat down and they all introduced themselves to me, told me their ranks, where they were traveling in from. I was finally hit with the question, so what I want to know is, why aren't you at this conference to help your biz when you live 20 minutes away? I was not prepared and I was so embarrassed. I felt obligated to tell them this whole sob story on how I was newly married, how my parents got sick with COVID and we didn't know if they would make it right before my wedding, and how we had to change pretty much every detail of our wedding. I honestly didn't know if we would be getting married at that point with how sick my parents were and having to change every detail we had planned. Thankfully, my parents got better and we were able to get married still, but it was so stressful and emotional, and I mentally and financially could not continue young living. I was so overwhelmed that I started crying, telling all of these strangers very personal details about myself. It was so embarrassing. They all seemed somewhat understanding, but they all concluded that I was still diamond material and how I had so much potential. They used my vulnerabilities and struggles against me. I was so hurt. I hate this for you. I can imagine that you felt so caught off guard when you show up to what you think is going to be a coffee date with your friend, and now there's 10 other people on your team who are all questioning you and grilling you about why you're not working the biz hard enough anymore. And by way of doing that, you're now feeling forced to divulge all this personal information to people you don't even know, justifying your own personal decisions to strangers. What's really unique about the MLM dynamic, though, is that I'm sure those people feel entitled to know why you're not working the business anymore, because in some way, shape, or form, they are associated with you and your efforts do kind of reflect on them and vice versa. If you were upholding a certain level of performance as a downline member of theirs and now you're not anymore, that impacts them directly. So I'm sure, like I said, they feel entitled, like, okay, well, you used to be doing it this way and now you're not anymore. What's the deal? And even though they are literal strangers, you are still connected to them in that very unique way, which I'm sure makes for a very uncomfortable situation and conversation with them. I ended up spending that whole hour with all of them hanging out, and all they could talk about was young living. I was upset that I didn't get to spend time with just my friend, so I asked her if I could meet up with her at her Airbnb the next morning and take her to coffee. She agreed and we made the plan. I picked her up the next morning and we went to get coffee. It was actually really nice. We caught up on our lives and she was asking me how being newly married was. It felt like a regular friendship for a moment. After we got coffee, we walked to a local shop that sells all kinds of cute gifts and trinkets. I had been a regular there, so at this point I had gotten to have conversations regularly with the employees and owner. We shopped around, and when it was time to check out, the owner made a comment on my glasses and how cute they were. She said how she'd never seen me wear that pair and that she loved them. I thought that was so sweet that she had remembered me from all the other times I had been in there. As soon as we left, my upline started encouraging me to go back and ask the owner if we could collab and if I could use her store to host a young living event. She thought it was so cool that she remembered me. What I saw as a sweet interaction, she saw as dollar signs. I felt so yucky about it. I told her I didn't want to do that and then just kind of brushed it off. I will never forget that. It was the final straw for me and such a clear indication that people in MLMs become so brainwashed to the point of seeing every interaction with anything that breathes as a money-making opportunity. I hated that. I've now been out of Young Living for almost 2 years, and I'm so glad that my time in MLM was as short as it was. I'm now proudly anti-MLM and strongly advise others from joining such a dangerous business model. Last thing, since watching your videos and hearing about some of the other MLM companies out there, I had a memory I had stored deep within myself unlocked. I even had to call my mom about it to see if it was real or if I was making it up. Anytime I heard you talk about Kirby salespeople, I kept feeling this weird and familiar feeling like I had an experience with them, but I had no idea what it was. And then I had this memory where I was probably 3 or 4 standing next to my mom at our garage door. In the memory, there was a man trying to pitch her something, and when she declined and went to shut the door, he put his foot in the door to continue his Kirby pitch. Ew. My mom has 7 kids, and at the time she stayed home and homeschooled all of us. So she had to have all 7 of of us by herself at home with a strange man trying to get in to show us a vacuum. So freaking strange. I hadn't thought about this since it happened, and your videos unlocking that memory was a strange feeling for sure. What is with Kirby salespeople putting their foot indoors? At this point, I am absolutely 100% convinced that is something they train them to do. The number of times I have heard that exact anecdote is countless. I've gone on many rants about Kirby salespeople before. I won't go down that road right now, but let's just say this is not uncommon, and I am almost positive this is something that Kirby reps are told to do. Anyways, if you end up reading this and putting it in a video, thank you, and thank you for posting what you do. Because of these stories, I feel like less of a failure, and I know that I did work really hard. The system is truly created to keep those at the bottom struggling so the ones at the top can live comfortably. Keep doing what you're doing. Thank you. And I love to hear that because a huge goal of the horror story videos is to validate other people's experiences. By you sharing what happened to you, someone else out there is going to listen to it and think, you know what, that happened to me too. And it's okay, and it's not my fault. I know that I worked hard. I know that I wasn't a failure. The system was designed to fail me. That is what I hope people get out of these horror stories, so thank you for saying that. And you also make a great point about somebody in an MLM seeing everything and everyone as dollar signs. We talk about that a lot. Usually when MLM reps go out in public, they are trying to make those personal connections to further their businesses, but in this case, she was just simply observing a connection you already had with someone else, and she saw that as a way to further her business. It must be exhausting to have your business mind turned on at all times like that you can't even go to a local shop and browse around with your friend that you haven't seen in a long time without trying to find some kind of business opportunity within all of it. Even Zeke feels like that's ridiculous and exhausting. I'm so glad you wrote in your story because I'm sure it's very validating for others out there listening to it. And I just want to reiterate one more time that if you did fail at an MLM, please know that it's not for a lack of trying, it's not for a lack of effort or hard work or time. The MLM business model is just not set up for everybody to succeed. Thank you for sharing your story. This story says, "Hi Hannah, I just want to say I'm a huge fan of your channel and I absolutely adore your two cats. My name is Michaela and you can use my name for this story. In 2008, when I was 18, I started training in Taekwondo and I absolutely loved it. I trained with my entire family, mother, father, and my younger brother and sister, but eventually it was just my father and I. The school I trained at catered to all ages. The youngest students were 2 to 3 years old and our oldest students were in their 70s, but the majority of the students were children. However, in 2018, the owner's wife joined a liquid collagen MLM. I want to say it was Modere, but I'm not entirely sure, and I'm also not sure if I spelled it right. I don't want to look it up. And within months, the rest of the wives of the instructors and a few female instructors had joined her downline. Unfortunately, their business started taking over the school. Throughout my time at the school, they would hold seminars twice a month. The subjects covered in the seminars would range from learning about other forms of martial arts to meditation and yoga to various health and wellness topics, like the importance of proper nutrition, self-care, and getting enough rest. And well, very shortly after the wives and girlfriends of the instructors joined Modere, their sales pitches started making their way into the bi-weekly seminars. I feel the need to reiterate that the vast majority of the students who trained at the school were children between the ages of 7 and 15, many of whom would take whatever lessons the instructors taught to heart and sometimes to the extreme. The wives and girlfriends started telling the students, again 80% of whom were children, about the importance of incorporating liquid collagen and the other supplements the company sold into their daily routines. Like how it would help them recover from intense workouts faster and more efficiently, how the supplements would help them achieve the ideal nutrition for a martial artist, how it would help them stay focused in school. To say it was disgusting was an understatement. Eventually, parents started complaining about the predatory nature of the sales pitches. A good deal of the parents were complaining about how their children were begging them to buy liquid collagen and other supplements, and they were scaled back. After the seminars went back to their usual programming, the Huns started trying to recruit the slim number of adult students and the parents of students. I soon learned that I was person of importance number 1. At the time, I was 28 years old, a single adult student, meaning I didn't have any children training in the school or any kids at all, and I was the only adult in the instructor training program who hadn't joined the downline yet. They started aggressively trying to recruit me for their downline. I did what I could to avoid them before or after the training sessions and turn them down when I couldn't avoid them. This whole dynamic at your Taekwondo school has got to be really frustrating for you, trying to dodge sale pitches at every turn, as well as the fact that they're pitching to literal children, saying that they need supplements to improve their performance. Whether or not liquid collagen is going to actually be beneficial for Taekwondo performance, I don't know. I'm kind of inclined to think that if the people at the school weren't selling it, then it probably would not be pushed on the students. And to be a parent of one of those kids must be really frustrating too, because your kid's coming back from class saying, "Hey mom, so-and-so tells me I need such and such product, and will you buy it for me?" And that puts the parent in such an awkward position too. It does sound like Modere overrun this school, or whatever the company was. You did admit that you're not for sure that it was Modere, but it sounds like it was. And I just feel like that would be completely irritating for anybody who wasn't involved with the company themselves and they just had to hear about it all the time. One day, about 2 months before I was set to test for my first degree black belt, the lead instructor, not the owner, told me that the owner wanted to talk to me about an employment opportunity. I was completely ecstatic. I loved working with the younger and lower ranking students, and I agreed to meet with the owner. The day of the meeting arrived and I was a mix of nervous and excited. I walked into the conference room and to my confusion, the owner's wife was sitting there with a packet of papers and she told me to take a seat. Can we all see where this is going? I think so. Besides being married to the owner, she had nothing to do with the school. Before I could ask what was going on, she greeted me with the usual, "Hello, ma'am." All students use sir or ma'am when addressing people in the school regardless of age or rank. Then immediately went into her, "I was wondering if you would be interested in joining my downline pitch." I have never felt more betrayed in my entire life, and I politely told her, "Ma'am, with all due respect, I'm not interested in joining your downline. I was under the impression that I would be meeting with the owner about becoming a paid instructor." She told me, "Oh no, it's nothing like that. I just couldn't find the time to talk to you directly, so I asked your instructor to set this meeting up for me." I couldn't bring myself to say anything else. I just walked out of the room, barely able to keep it together. I didn't even stay for my training session that night. 2 weeks later, at my training contact renewal meeting, I tearfully told my instructor and the owner that because of what had happened with being deceived into thinking I would be hired by the school and the constant harassment to join the owner's wife's downline, I wouldn't be renewing my contract. I didn't hold back either. I told the owner it was despicable that he allowed his wife to try peddling her MLM products to extremely impressionable children, and how hypocritical it was of them to teach about honesty and integrity and then turn around and lie to a longtime student about an employment opportunity. They had nothing to say to me about it, not even an apology, and I walked away from an activity I loved less than 2 months before I was set to earn my first degree black belt. That's awful. I mean, I can't blame you. I think you were making a good decision for yourself, but that is terrible that you were so close to this really big achievement. I think you said you were in it when you were 18 and now you were 28. Yeah, you've been at this school for a decade, and all of it came crashing down because of this MLM that overrun the school. I am so sorry that happened. That's a really, really big bummer. Shortly after I left, the owner's wife and her downline were barred from peddling their snake oil products at the school in the various functions the school held because of the sheer number of parent complaints, and they were losing students over the matter. And within 6 months, nearly everyone who joined the owner's wife's downline had stopped selling the products. Every so often, I regret my decision to leave over something so trivial since I owe a lot to training in the martial arts, which includes repairing a very rocky relationship I had had with my father. But I had lost all respect for my lead instructor and the owner, and I didn't think I'd be able to continue my training under them. Thank you for taking the time to read this story. Wishing you and your family all the best. I mean, I can see how you might go back and forth in your mind, wondering if that was the right decision to leave after so long, especially being so close to your black belt. But at the end of the day, you said that you lost all of your respect for the instructor and for the owner of the martial arts studio. So I also feel like that's kind of hard to come back from. If you feel like you're being harassed to buy MLM products every time you go there, and then you also felt duped like they were going to give you a legitimate job opportunity and then it ended up being a Modere pitch, I get that. I understand why you would feel really hurt and betrayed and you would want to leave that studio. It's so sad that this is yet another example of how MLMs can just infiltrate and ruin so many different environments. I feel like most commonly we hear about this happening in families or close-knit friend groups or maybe even craft fairs. This is the first time I've heard of this happening at a Taekwondo school. I've heard about this happening at dance studios before, but this is the first time I've heard about it in the martial arts space. But to be honest, it doesn't really matter what setting we're talking about. The impacts are the same. One person in the group gets involved with the MLM, almost like they're infected by it, is kind of what I'm tempted to say, and then they spread it to everyone else, and it kind of ruins it for everybody else in the group. I've never really thought about it like this before, but it is kind of true that it's like when somebody catches a virus, either you catch it too, or you spend all this time and energy trying to dodge it and not catching it, right? That's truly what this feels like. It is so unfortunate. I'm glad at least that it seems like some of the parents were speaking up and saying, hey, this has gotta stop. We've gotta put an end to this. And I'm sure that you deciding to leave sent a very strong message to the owner. I'm glad to hear that enough people were against it and were loud enough in voicing those opinions to get it banned from the school entirely. I think that is kind of a silver lining into your whole story. I really appreciate you sending this one in. This one says, hi Hannah, I actually submitted a story recently, but I wanted to submit this one too. It's a little more unusual than some of the things you've shared before, but I do need to remain anonymous for this story as it involved a family friend. My parents have a neighbor who is a stay-at-home mom with several kids. Over the years, she's tried her hand at multiple MLMs, all of which we ended up at parties and all for. I can't recall all of them, but I know one was Pampered Chef. However, a few years ago, she became a rep for doTERRA, and she really dove into the oily life. She spent a lot of time telling people about all the health benefits and the cures of this stuff, and yes, she is one of the people who not only ingests it, but encourages her customers to do so as well. doTERRA sells the veggie caps required to ingest the oils as a pill. We listened for years as she told all of us this, complete with her big book of oils and oil concoctions that could treat anything from a bug bite to cancer. She used to bring us mixes for various things all the time, in a way hoping to make a sale. And I know that she wanted me in her downline, but I didn't take the bait. She was even treating one of her own kids with oils for his very severe ADHD. She has already sworn it works, but as someone with ADHD myself, I can tell perfectly well it isn't having the effect she wants. I won't go into all of that as it's her family's private issue, and I believe she may have given in and has him on some kind of actual medication now, but I'm not sure. Anyway, several years ago, our family began a tragedy. My father was diagnosed with brain cancer, a very aggressive form, and he was told that it was terminal. This isn't going the way you think, but it is relevant. With removal of the tumor and treatment, his life expectancy was at most 5 years. Now, Dad was always a very science-first kind of guy. He believed absolutely nothing if it could not be backed up with hard scientific facts. So there was nothing any oil peddler was going to tell him that was going to convince him that even supplementing his treatments with oils was worth his time. And then they removed the tumor. His tumor was advanced enough that he was taken from an urgent care to the hospital via ambulance. We had taken him to urgent care because he was having trouble standing up and walking but didn't feel dizzy. At this point, we had no idea what they even suspected, let alone that his brain was being taken over by an aggressive tumor. By the next morning, Dad was in surgery to remove it. The tumor had what I can only describe as tendrils that spread from it around his brain and down his brainstem. They removed what they could, but they couldn't get all of it. However, the man that woke up after that surgery was not my dad. He was a completely different person, very aggressive and very violent. He was also very desperate to live. He had his living will done away with and told them to keep him alive at all costs, and he was willing to try anything, including the oily life. First of all, I want to say I'm so sorry about the news of your dad. It really is a family tragedy when anybody is diagnosed with cancer, let alone something as aggressive as this and as advanced as this. It sounds like something that was not caught in the early stages, and I'm sure that is just really difficult to deal with as a family. I am kind of fascinated, though, to hear that he went into surgery as one person and then he had parts of his brain removed, and when he came out of surgery, he was a completely different person. I've heard of that happening before. And now it seems like he is desperate to live, and he might even be turning to essential oils after all. I'm intrigued to read the rest of your story. In her defense, the family friend slash doTERRA rep tried to convince him that the oils would not cure his cancer. He could use it for some other medical issues like wounds and swelling, but not the cancer. Either way, he had heard so much about how these oils were a cure-all that he decided it was just the snake oil he needed and no one was going to tell him differently. We began his chemo and radiation, but he didn't go to his appointments consistently. There was a lot of other stuff going on around all of this, but I won't get into it. But he kept going after this woman to treat his wounds and whatever else with her magic oils. I think at this point she only did it because she and everyone else was completely afraid of him. He kept trying to buy these oils and would get mad when she refused to sell them to him. He was convinced, and he kept throwing her previous sales pitches back at her about how these oils could treat anything. And the big book of oils even had mixes for cancer, and he wanted them. He began insisting. Even though she wasn't actually buying them from the company to get for him, he started taking his actual treatment for granted because he assumed he would eventually threaten her enough that she would. Dad eventually had to be cared for 24 hours a day and could no longer be transported safely for treatment. He had also become increasingly violent towards my mom and I, and since I could fight him off and get between him and others, his violence increased towards me. So we had to put him in a nursing home with a memory unit. At that point, we advised our friend not to visit him. He wasn't allowed access to outside communication devices. There was a very, very good reason for this, so he could no longer call and threaten her for oils. However, by this time, he had neglected his treatment so much that there wasn't really much they could do. Dad survived his cancer for about 2 years instead of the 5 everyone hoped for, and he passed away in the nursing home. Our friend does still use the oils for a lot of things, and you can smell the oils from the street outside her house, but she no longer has a downline and is no longer doing parties. I don't think she's actually selling the oils to anyone anymore, but keeps her account because she does use them in high quantity. I've watched a large amount of your videos and I appreciate that you are doing this. While we had a good rep that tried to convince him the oils couldn't cure cancer, it scares me to think that there are some out there who would have given in to him or even agreed that they could cure his cancer. And you never know what future effects those seemingly innocent pitches could have. I'm sure she never dreamed she would be in the situation she ended up in with an aggressive man who is becoming increasingly aggressive about an oil fix. Thank you again. This has got to be one of the more unique stories I've read on my channel because it's the exact opposite of what we're used to seeing, which is the doTERRA reps themselves or the MLM reps themselves coming up with all these insane bogus claims and then pitching them that way as the cure for whatever disease or ailment you have. In this case, it's the customer who has all of these assumptions about what the oils can do for him, and he's almost demanding that he be sold these oils because of what he believes they have the power to do. Even though the doTERRA rep herself is saying it's not going to cure your cancer, it doesn't really work like that. It's almost like he can't be convinced otherwise, and he just insists on being sold the oils that are going to be his cure-all. I'm sure that had to be really jarring for you as his child to watch him go into surgery one person and come out of surgery a different person who is now thinking and acting in ways that the dad you know would never do. It sounds like he was a very logical, science-based person in the way that he thought about things, and now after having big portions of his brain removed, he's thinking in a completely different way. I'm sure that was really difficult on the family to see him acting in ways that were not in his best interest of treating his cancer. It sounds like if he did go through with chemo and radiation, that maybe his life expectancy could have been extended a few more years, but because he turned to oils instead against the recommendation of the oil sales rep, it sounds like he didn't get the proper treatment he needed, and therefore he passed away a lot earlier than expected, and I'm so sorry for that. Like you said though, this story isn't going in the way you think it's gonna go, and you're right about that. At the beginning of your story, I was kind of thinking to myself, oh yeah, here we go again. Someone diagnosed with cancer, an MLM rep claims they have the cure or the treatment, and it doesn't go down well. But actually in this case, the exact opposite happened. Most likely just due to the nature of his cancer and the fact that he did have to have portions of his brain removed. It also seems like he was kind of relying on his previous experience in his previous life of this neighbor who is known to be pitching her oils and claiming that they have all these wonderful uses and how they can be a cure-all, and how there's this magical book that says that you can use certain oils as a treatment for cancer, and he's sort of relying on that as his golden ticket to treat himself, and that's just really sad. A very unique story for sure. Again, I'm so sorry for the loss of your dad, but I really appreciate you sharing your story with us. This story says, "Hi Hannah, I was going through some old boxes of mine at my parents' house this weekend and I found an old bottle of satin hands from Mary Kay. That unlocked an old memory and family drama. Enjoy." I was turning 12 and very interested in makeup, but my mother was very against me wearing makeup due to my age and very sensitive skin. My aunt offered to take me out for a girls' date for my birthday. We went to a movie, had lunch, and went shopping. I had a blast. Before we went home, she told me that we had one more stop to make, but I had to keep it a secret from my mom. She told me her work friend Barbie recently left her office job and was selling makeup full-time. She said Barbie was doing very well with her business and offered to give me a free spa treatment for our girls' date. I had never had a spa treatment before, so I was very excited. We got to Barbie's house and went to the kitchen for the spa treatment. Barbie used all kinds of things on me, including face, lip, eye, and hand items. My favorite was the satin hands, so my aunt bought it for me. I liked the way it smelled and how soft it made my hands feel. Barbie was trying to push us to buy everything she used on me, but I was only interested in the hand cream. My aunt bought a few things for herself as well. My aunt took me home and I hid my satin hands from my mom as instructed by my aunt. Later that night, my face and hand started to itch. By morning, my skin was red and sore all over. I had reacted to just about everything except the lip gloss. My mother was furious at my aunt and me when she found out about the spa treatment, but we never told her about the satin hands that was still hidden in her house. I was gonna throw out the satin hands, but my aunt encouraged me to hold on to it. She said that my reaction would eventually go away if I used it enough, and I believed her. I don't think that's how that works with a hand cream. I don't know. Regardless, why would you want to continue using a product that was painful and uncomfortable and gave you a rash? She also told me to let her know when I ran out of it and she would get more from Barbie to sneak to me. I still used satin hands for a few days after the initial reaction, so everything else was healing but my hands. My mom was concerned and took me to the doctor. The doctor said it may just need more time to work its way out of my system and we would wait a few more days to see what happened. I stopped using it after that, but I never got around to throwing it out. I was worried my mom would catch me with it and that I'd be in more trouble. My aunt and my mom already had a bad relationship before, but this incident really put it over the edge. My mom didn't find out about the hand cream in her house and that my aunt still wanted me to use it until I finally came clean this weekend 21 years later. My mom was angry at her sister for putting me in that position as a child and for having me continue to use a product that was clearly harmful for me behind her back. They stopped talking years ago over a different incident, so no resolution there. Hi, Zeke. I have a few more cringy stories to email you. Thank you for sharing these stories and spreading awareness. Isn't it funny how so many years later we can find these things that unlock these hidden memories for us, like the bottle of Mary Kay satin hands? I'm not loving this whole dynamic of sneaking the 12-year-old into this Mary Kay pamper session and then buying things for her that don't react well with her skin and then encouraging her to keep using that product and telling her to let you know when it runs out so you can buy more for her, even though we know mom's gonna be really upset if she finds out about all of this. We don't really know how much of a role the Mary Kay rep herself played in this entire situation, but it seems like she should probably be able to find other customers that aren't a forbidden off-limits 12-year-old girl who's not supposed to have access to this stuff and whose mom would be very angry about it if she found out. There are plenty of other people out there to sell to. We don't need to be sneaking satin hands to a child. I'm inclined to say that more of that blame is probably placed on your aunt than the Mary Kay rep herself. But regardless, it does make for a very entertaining horror story, especially this part where your mom takes you to the doctor because your hands aren't clearing up even when all the other areas of your skin did. Little did she know that you were still using this hidden, forbidden hand cream. That's super funny to me. I really appreciate this story. I love the more lighthearted one, so thanks for sending this in. And with that, my friends, that's all the stories I have for you for this MLM Horror Stories video today. I know I said it at the beginning, but I'll reiterate it again here. If you have your own story you would like to send in to me and have considered for a horror stories video, my inbox is always open. I can never, ever have too many stories, and you can check out the information in the description box below for how to send that to me. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you, and I'll see you in my next one real soon. Thank you.